practical. The 3rd of June, I mentioned to you a little earlier that the 3rd of June was the day on which Elvis Presley received an A in language but only a C in music on his 8th grade report card at the Humes High School in Memphis, Tennessee. It is also World Clubfoot Day, and in the studio with me is Karen Moss, founder and director of STEPS SA, which is an NPO focused on the eradication of clubfoot in southern and East Africa. Karen, welcome.
Thank you, John.
One doesn't start an NPO like this unless one has personal involvement, knowledge of the problem.
Yes, I have a personal story linked to clubfoot. My son was born with clubfoot 13 years ago, and we found...
do we need to tell people? Perhaps we do. Perhaps we need to tell people what clubfoot is.
Yeah, I think we do. A lot of people don't know, or they just have a vague idea about it. It's basically it's a birth defect or congenital disorder, which means it occurs at birth, and the foot is turned over and sideways and pointing down, so that in order to walk, you have to have the clubfoot corrected. People with untreated or neglected clubfoot are literally walking on the tops of their feet or the sides of their feet, which is obviously not very good for mobility. So,
how common is it?
We work on a figure of between 1 in 500 children and 1 in 750, but
many as that.
Well,
it's
Africa,
as common as that.
Yes, very, very common, and even more so in South Africa and East Africa, more than the world average. So we have a big problem with clubfoot in this country, where it's maybe not always that recognised.
And so back to your personal story, you had a clubfoot son born. How long ago?
13 years ago. And in those days, most doctors advised pretty radical surgery. And I didn't
radical surgery.
Well, in terms of an invasive surgery, so they would cut the foot open. And
try and realign the bones.
Yes, realign the joints and, put pins in. And
with what level of success generally?
Well, there's been varying studies of long-term success. Initially, the short-term success looks good, the foot looks straight, but what happens as the child grows, very often there will be scar tissue, and some people get even arthritis as teenagers from this, the post-surgical effects. And this doctor that I discovered on the internet had been researching it in the 1950s, and he had decided to try and find a different way of understanding the anatomy of clubfoot, and he came up with a technique which was far less invasive and had far better results.
And this was the Ponseti technique, and World Clubfoot Day is to sort of honour the founder of that. And you were in the fortunate position of being able to go to America to have your young boy treated in this way.
Yes, well, it was still quite an unknown treatment in those days. It hadn't even reached Australia, actually, and a lot of other places. A lot of doctors were still using the method of operating on club feet in the States as well. I mean, I think at that time probably 5% of doctors were doing the Ponseti method in America. Now it's over 90%. So things have changed hugely, and I think it's been through people, advocates on the internet mainly, spreading the word, because Dr. Ponseti started his method in the 1950s, and I found out about it in 2003, 50 years later, and it was still quite unknown. So
it's obviously not invasive surgery, so what is it?
Well, both... clubfoot has always involved some kind of conservative approach initially, where people would cast on the feet. The problem was when they were manipulating the foot, they weren't really manipulating it in a specific way, which he then determined was a way that had to be done in order for the foot to change shape. So what happens is when the cast is applied, you first manipulate
what we would know as a plaster of Paris
cast,
that
plaster
sort of
thing. Paris, sorry. Yeah. And that goes all the way from the tip of the toes right up to the groin and the baby's leg. And you start that at about 2 weeks old, in the ideal situation. Obviously, in the rural areas, it's not always the case. And the cast is then changed every week. But the manipulations that are done are very specific and to do certain things at each time, so that it's a very
put the cast
applied,
on, manipulate, put the cast on, leave it on for a bit, take it off, manipulate it some more, put another cast on, and keep that process going until the foot is properly anatomically aligned.
Yes, and you can do that in about 4 to 8 casts, depending on the skill of the person who's doing it and how severe the clubfoot is. So you can literally have a child with a straightened foot in 2 months.
Which is what happened to your son, is it?
Well, my son's was done in 3 weeks, because when we got to Dr. Ponseti, he'd had some treatment in South Africa, and I'd found him through the internet. And within 16 days, his feet were straight, because what Dr. Ponseti would do, and quite a lot of clinics do when they have visiting people, is they will accelerate the treatment. So my son's casts would change every 3 or 4 days instead of every week, and it worked just as well. So within 16 days, his feet were straight. What follows after the cast for a lot of children is they will have a small procedure at the back of the heel, which they basically just snip the back tendon, and the heel drops, and then that's the final part of the treatment.
So your 13-year-old boy now moves as easily as, in inverted commas, normally as somebody who wasn't born clubfoot, or is there still is he still
absolutely no difference at all? Dr. Ponseti said that an early treated and well treated foot is basically a functional foot. It's you can't really tell the difference. I mean, I've taken him for physio, and the physio didn't even know that he had clubfoot. He surfs, he plays cricket at school, he plays hockey, he used to do cross country. You know, his feet are very flexible as well, which is good.
And when did you start Steps?
2005 was when I started. He was 2 years old then. I had done a lot of on the ground talking to doctors, and a couple of them had shown interest and had started using the method already, but there hadn't been anything officially done to get it sort of, prognosis about what does this work and consensus around whether we should all do it in South Africa. So I thought the only way to really move things forward was to start an NGO. I had never had any experience in NGOs. I came from a business background. So I relied heavily on people advising me what to do, made quite a lot of mistakes in the beginning and lots of paperwork to fill out. But within a year, we were holding our first training, and I'd managed to get sponsorship to cover that, built up a database, 67 doctors came, and that was really when it all started, because then they realized...
So is there now universal acceptance within South African medical circles that Ponseti is the way to treat clubfoot?
Absolutely. The South African Pediatric Orthopedic Society officially endorsed it 4 years ago. They were, unofficially endorsing it already. It's best practice. It's trained. All the medical schools are using it as their first choice for treatment when they train medical students. We are one of the success stories actually in the world, and how fast it's changed.
But that requires somebody to whom a clubfoot child is born to know that there is a remedy and know how to access that remedy. Otherwise, having the remedy available is moot for that parent.
That's right, and that's why I carry on doing Steps, is because it's really about advocacy and supporting the families. Because when you've had a child with clubfoot, and I come from a fairly comfortable background, and I had access to a lot of information, I was overwhelmed and distressed and worried. And you think about somebody who doesn't have the same access as I had and what they're going through. So we have, as Steps, as an organization, focused very much on the welfare of the patient and also supporting families through the process, because once you finish that casting process that I explained, the child still has to sleep in a little brace, which is shoes attached to a bar. And that's, sleepless nights for parents. It's getting used to that, and that's up until the age of 4. So it's a massive commitment from parents to see the treatment through from start to finish. The results are amazing, but when you're in the middle of that, you need all the support you can get.
And what percentage of the 1 in 500 children that is born with a clubfoot are getting access to decent treatment?
Well, there isn't clear data around all the clinics. We think it's probably about half of them every year. We think that half of the children are still not accessing effective treatment. Some of them, especially in the more outlying areas outside Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, Bloemfontein, they are going to clinics where some of the mothers are told, just rub your children's feet, they'll get straight. Or the children, there's nothing wrong with your child's feet, and this type of thing happens. And then they only arrive at the big clinics when the child's a year old. And now that obviously...
If it's not treated early enough, what are the mobility consequences in later life as a toddler, as a tween, as a teen?
Well, if you're not treated by the age of 3, it does impact far worse on your mobility, because you will probably need some kind of surgery. There are adults with neglected clubfoot who are disabled. They can't lead normal lives. So if you get that child even by the age of 1, you're still going to have very good results, and often by the age of 2. It depends on the person who's treating it, though, because obviously the older they get, the more experienced that doctor has to be. With early intervention, if a child is at the clinic at 2 weeks old. Physiotherapists, OTs, all kinds of people can help to massage and manipulate that foot and cast it.
You have some brightly coloured shoelaces next to you. I presume you didn't buy those at Mr. Price Home on your way in here. I presume you brought them in for a purpose.
Yeah, it was a little bit more stressful than going to Mr. Price Home. We're partnering with a couple of organisations to bring clubfoot braces to children, because what I discovered during my crusade was that the children that were having their feet manipulated didn't necessarily have the braces, and then it was all a failure because the feet would turn back in again, and then we'd start the whole process. So the last couple of years have been very much focused on finding a good source of braces to supply to the hospitals, either donate or they buy them, and to get every child a brace. So we came up with a concept of laces for braces, which is the bright shoelaces, so people support. It has a twofold purpose, because we're raising awareness why you're wearing those bright shoelaces and talking about it. Plus, the funds that are raised from it will go towards the program and buy braces for kids. So it has an effect of talking about it on Dr. Ponsetti's birthday. He would have been 102 today. So
I'm surprised he's not still alive. He did last for almost ever.
I know, he did.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are, do you have retail outlets that stock those, or do you have to get those via the website?
Yes, at the moment we have big plans for next year, but this campaign was very very rushed. We had that bright idea, realized that we had decided too late to do it, but we will have retail partners next year. For now, it's through the website, and we have a few people selling them for us around the country. And we also have a virtual laces campaign. So if people like the story and want to donate to help a child, they can actually donate through our website. And we have a special campaign. And our goal is to help 4 children from birth to 4 years by buying this virtual
And the website
laces.
is steps.org.za.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
And also that would be first port of call for advice. I mean, anybody listening who's felt a little nervous to call in, for example, and ask for advice would be able to go to that website.
Yes.
And there would be a communication channel
Yes,
through
and
which
they're welcome to phone our offices as well. There's somebody there all day to answer questions.
Can it be applied on older kids is an SMS question which has come through.
It can. It's something that has to be assessed by the doctor, though, because it's very difficult to say, what treatment they've had before. So, yeah, it can, but it would have to be checked first.
Okay, steps.org.za. Karen Moss, founder and director of Steps SA. Thank you very, very much for coming in. Thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing on behalf of this cause.
Thank you very much for having me.
It is a great pleasure. News